The space station hung in the dark void like a giant metal flower. Its silver arms stretched out in all directions, each one holding docking bays for ships from across the galaxy. Harmony Point was built for moments like this. When the galaxy needed to talk, this is where they came. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the viewing port watching alien ships arrive one by one. Each vessel looked different from the last. Some were sleek and silver, others rough and angular. The diversity never stopped amazing him. Even after 20 years of contact with other worlds, "Captain, the Zephyrian ship just docked," Lieutenant Katie Phillips said behind him. Her voice carried a hint of worry. Everyone knew why the Zephyrians were here, and it wasn't for friendly conversation. Jake turned from the window. Katie was young, maybe 28, with bright eyes that missed nothing. She had learned 17 alien languages in the past 5 years. Next to her stood Commander Ryan Brooks, a solid man with gray hair and the kind of steady presence that made people feel safe. "How big is their delegation?" Jake asked. 12 of them, Ryan answered. "All military from what our sensors can tell. No diplomats, no scientists, just warriors." Jake nodded. That told him everything he needed to know about Zephyrian intentions. What about the others? The Saurians sent 3 representatives, the Vex brought 4. The Delphinians have 2. Katie checked her tablet. All of them arrived early. They've been waiting in the conference room for an hour. The 3 humans walked through the station's main corridor. Other species moved around them, some tall, some short, some walking on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. Most gave the humans curious looks. Earth was still the new kid in galactic politics. They reached the conference room doors. Jake paused and looked at his team. "Remember, we're here to listen first. These people are scared, and scared people make bad decisions. Our job is to help them make good ones." The doors opened with a soft hiss. The room was enormous, with a round table in the center big enough for 50 beings. Representatives from 3 species sat on one side, looking small and nervous. They were the Alliance, the desperate group that had called for this meeting. The Saurians looked like humans might have millions of years ago, if humans had kept their reptile ancestors' scales and tails. Their leader, Ambassador Skell, had intelligent yellow eyes that darted nervously around the room. The Vex were harder to look at directly. They resembled giant insects, with 4 arms and compound eyes that saw everything at once. Their representative, Click Whistle Buzz, communicated through a translation device that turned their sounds into words. The Delphinians were the strangest of all. They lived in water on their home world and wore special suits filled with liquid to survive in air. Their delicate, flowing current moved with the grace of a swimmer even on dry land. On the other side of the table sat the Zephyrians. Jake had seen pictures, but seeing them in person was different. They were massive, easily 8 feet tall, with thick armor-like skin that looked like it could stop bullets. 4 powerful arms ended in claws that could tear through steel. Their leader, War Prince Korvac, had scars across his face that spoke of countless battles. Korvac looked up when the humans entered. His eyes were small and red, like drops of blood in his massive head. "So," he said in a voice like grinding stone, "the children have arrived." Jake sat down across from him. Katie and Ryan took seats on either side. "War Prince Korvac," Jake said politely. "Thank you for coming." Korvac laughed, a sound like rocks falling down a mountain. "I came because it amuses me. You small species, think you can stop the inevitable with words?" Ambassador Skell leaned forward. "War Prince, our worlds have done nothing to threaten yours. Why do you attack us?" "Because you exist," Korvac said simply. "Because you have resources we need. Because you are weak and we are strong. This is the way of the universe." Click Whistle Buzz's translator crackled. "Our people have families, children. They do not deserve to die for your expansion." "Your people will serve the Empire," Korvac replied. "Those who work will live. Those who resist will not. This is generous." Flowing current suit bubbled as they spoke. "You call slavery generous? I call it survival," Korvac said. His red eyes moved to Jake. "And what do the humans think? Will you beg for mercy like the others?" Jake studied the War Prince for a Long moment. Around the table, everyone waited. The Alliance representatives looked hopeful but frightened. The Zephyrians looked amused. "We think," Jake said slowly, "that you're making a mistake." Korvac's laugh was louder this time. "A mistake? Look at me, human. Look at my warriors. We are bred for war. We have conquered 17 worlds in the past year. Your species has been in space for barely 2 decades. "That's true," Jake agreed. "We're new to all this, but being new doesn't make us weak." "No?" Korvac leaned forward. "Then what makes you strong? Your small bodies? Your single pair of arms? Your soft skin that tears at the slightest touch?" Katie shifted in her seat. Ryan's hand moved closer to his sidearm, but Jake remained calm. "Our minds," he said simply. Korvac stared at him for several seconds. Then he threw back his massive head and roared with laughter. His warriors joined in, filling the room with the sound of their amusement. "Minds," Korvac repeated when he could speak again. "The human thinks his thoughts will stop my claws." "Not stop," Jake said. "Win." The laughter died away. Korvac's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Jake looked around the table. Every being in the room was watching him now. The Alliance representatives had hope in their eyes. The Zephyrians had skepticism. His own team had trust. "You asked what makes us strong," Jake said. "It's not our bodies. You're right about that. It's what we do when someone threatens our friends." Korvac's claws clicked against the table. "And what is that, human?" Jake's voice was quiet, but every being in the room heard every word clearly. "We remember every war we've ever fought, every strategy that worked, every mistake that led to defeat. We learn from all of it." He paused. "And then we teach others." "Pretty words," Korvac said, but his voice had lost some of its amusement. "Not words," Jake replied. "History. You want to know what humans do when someone threatens people we care about?" He stood up slowly. "We turn them into the most dangerous thing in the galaxy." "And what is that?" Korvac demanded. Jake looked directly into the War Prince's red eyes. "Us." The room fell completely silent. Even the station's machinery seemed to hold its breath. Korvac studied Jake for a long moment. Then he smiled, showing teeth like broken glass. "You speak boldly for such a small creature." "I speak honestly," Jake said. "You want conflict, War Prince? Then you've chosen death." War Prince Korvac's laughter echoed through the conference room like thunder. His warriors joined in, their voices creating a sound that made the metal walls vibrate. The Alliance representatives shrank back in their seats, fear clear in their eyes. "Death?" Korvac wiped his eyes with one of his 4 hands. "The little human threatens me with death?" He looked at his warriors. "Did you hear that? The soft, pink creature thinks he can kill us." Jake remained standing, his face calm. Katie and Ryan stayed in their seats, but both were ready to move if needed. Around the table, the other species watched with growing despair. They had hoped the humans might help, but now it seemed like their last chance was slipping away. "Captain Morrison," Ambassador Skell said quietly, "perhaps we should discuss this privately before making any final decisions." Korvac slammed one massive fist on the table. The sound was like a gunshot. "No private talks, no secret planning. You will surrender your worlds now, or we will take them by force. These are your only choices." Jake looked at the War Prince, then at his own team. "Commander Brooks, Lieutenant Phillips, I need a word with you outside." The 3 humans stood and walked toward the door. Behind them, Korvac called out, "Run along, little humans. When you come back, bring your surrender papers." More laughter followed them out of the room. In the corridor outside, Katie shook her head. "Jake, I don't think they're going to listen to reason. Korvac seems determined to fight." "Good," Ryan said quietly. "Because after listening to him for the past hour, I'm determined to stop him." Jake nodded. "That's what I was hoping you'd say. Katie, I need you to contact Admiral Carter on Earth. Tell her we need a full tactical assessment of Zephyrian military capabilities. Everything we can get." What about diplomatic solutions? Katie asked. There aren't any, Jake replied. Korvac made that clear. He's not here to negotiate. He's here to deliver an ultimatum. Ryan crossed his arms. So what's our play? Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking. We go back in there and give them exactly what they asked for. A surrender? Katie looked confused. No, Jake said. A history lesson. They returned to the conference room. Korvac was telling his warriors about their upcoming conquests, describing how they would divide the Alliance worlds among themselves. The Alliance representatives sat in silence, looking defeated. Jake took his seat. War Prince Korvac, you asked what makes humans strong. I'd like to answer that question properly. Korvac waved one hand dismissively. I have heard enough human words for one day. Just a few more, Jake said. You see, my species has a saying. Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. More pretty words, Korvac said, but his warriors had stopped talking. Something in Jake's tone made them listen. Jake looked around the table. Lieutenant Phillips, tell them about the Mongols. Katie straightened in her chair. 1300 years ago on Earth, a group of nomadic horsemen conquered the largest land empire in human history. They were outnumbered in every battle they fought, but they won through superior tactics and mobility. Ancient history, Korvac said. But he was listening now. Commander Brooks, Jake continued. Tell them about the Battle of Thermopylae. Ryan's voice was steady. 300 Spartan warriors held off an army of hundreds of thousands for 3 days. They knew they would die, but they bought time for their allies to prepare. The larger army won the battle but lost the war. Korvac's red eyes narrowed. What is your point, human? Jake stood up again. My point is that humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've fought enemies bigger than us, stronger than us, more numerous than us, and we've learned something very important. Which is? Size and strength don't win wars, Jake said. Preparation wins wars. Strategy wins wars. The willingness to sacrifice everything for victory wins wars. One of Korvac's warriors leaned forward. You think your ancient battles frighten us? Jake turned to look at him. I think you should be asking different questions. Such as? Why did humans spread across their entire planet? Why did we tame creatures 10 times our size? Why did we build weapons that could destroy our whole world? Jake paused. And why, in 20 years of galactic contact, has no species ever tried to invade Earth? The room grew quiet. Even the Zephyrian warriors had stopped making noise. Katie spoke up. Humans don't start wars, War Prince, but we finish them. We study our enemies, Ryan added. We learn their weaknesses. We adapt our tactics. And we never, ever give up. Jake walked around the table until he stood directly across from Korvac. You want to know what makes humans dangerous? It's not our strength. It's our memory. Every war we've ever fought, every battle we've ever lost, every mistake we've ever made, we remember all of it. Korvac was no longer laughing. And we teach others. Jake gestured to the Alliance representatives. These people came to us for help. Do you know what that means? It means they are weak, Korvac said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. It means they're smart, Jake replied. Smart enough to know that fighting you alone would be suicide. Smart enough to ask for help from the one species in the galaxy that specializes in winning impossible wars. Ambassador Skell looked up with new hope in his yellow eyes. Captain Morrison, are you saying humanity will help us? Jake nodded. I'm saying humanity will teach you. We'll teach you how to fight smart instead of hard. We'll teach you how to use your advantages and exploit their weaknesses. We'll teach you how to turn a losing war into a winning one. Korvac stood up, his massive frame towering over the table. You cannot be serious. You would go to war with the Zephyrian Empire? No, Jake said calmly. We would go to war with you. There's a difference. What difference? Jake's voice was quiet, but every being in the room heard him clearly. When we go to war with an empire, we study their history, their culture, their military doctrine. We learn everything about them. He paused. When we go to war with a person, we make it personal. Korvac's claws extended slightly. You threaten me personally? I'm telling you personally, Jake said, that you made a mistake when you decided to threaten our friends, and you made a bigger mistake when you decided to threaten Earth. The War Prince stared at Jake for a long moment. Around the table, everyone waited. The Alliance representatives looked hopeful for the first time since the meeting began. The Zephyrian warriors looked uncertain. Finally, Korvac spoke. You are either very brave or very stupid, human. Jake smiled for the first time since entering the room. War Prince, in human history, those two things are usually the same thing. Korvac turned to his warriors. We leave now. Prepare the fleets for immediate deployment. As the Zephyrians filed out of the room, Korvac stopped at the door. You have made your choice, Captain Morrison. Now you will live with the consequences. Jake watched him go. No, War Prince, now you will. 3 days after the meeting at Harmony Point, War Prince Korvac stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Iron Claw. Through the massive viewing screen, he could see 3 different star systems. Each one held a world belonging to the Alliance. Each one would be his by the end of the week. Status report, he commanded. General Thrak, his second-in-command, stepped forward. First Fleet is in position at the Saurian world. Second Fleet approaches the Vex colonies. Third Fleet will reach the Delphinian system in 6 hours. Korvac smiled, showing his razor-sharp teeth. And the humans? No sign of them, Thrak replied. Our scouts report no human ships in any of the 3 systems. Good. Korvac turned away from the screen. Begin the attacks. Show these insects what happens when they ask humans for help. Across the galaxy, the Zephyrian fleets moved like hungry predators. Their ships were massive and heavily armed. Each vessel could destroy a city with a single blast from its main guns. They had never lost a battle. On the Saurian world of Kestel, Ambassador Skell watched the enemy ships appear in his sky. Alarms rang throughout the capital city. People ran through the streets carrying their children and what few possessions they could grab. Skell's communication device buzzed. A familiar voice came through clearly. Ambassador, this is Captain Morrison. Captain, Skell's relief was obvious. Where are you? We need help immediately. We're here, Jake said. Look up. Skell rushed to his window and looked at the sky. At first he saw only the massive Zephyrian warships. Then his eyes caught something else. Smaller ships moving fast between the enemy vessels. Human ships. How many of you are there? Skell asked. Enough, Jake replied. Now listen carefully. We're going to teach you the first rule of human warfare, which is, never fight the enemy where they're strong. Fight them where they're weak. On his flagship, Korvac watched his tactical display with growing irritation. The human ships were too small and too fast for his main guns to hit. They darted between his vessels like insects, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. What are they doing? He demanded. General Thrak studied his instruments. They're not attacking us directly. They seem to be scanning our ships. Scanning for what? Before Thrak could answer, alarms began ringing throughout the Zephyrian fleet. Red lights flashed on every bridge. Report, Korvac roared. Sir, we're losing power to our engines. All ships report the same problem. Korvac stared at his display. His mighty fleet was slowing down, drifting in space like dead metal. How is this possible? On the bridge of the human ship defender, Dr. Alex Thompson smiled as he watched his plan work. Lieutenant Phillips was right about their engine design, he told Captain Morrison over the comm. They use a centralized power distribution system. Cut the right cables and the whole ship goes dark. Jake's voice came back through the speakers. Good work. Phase 2? Already in progress, Alex replied. Our people are inside 3 of their ships. They'll have control of the communication systems in 10 minutes. Meanwhile, on the Vex colony world, a different kind of battle was taking place. Major Pete Collins crouched behind a pile of rubble, watching Zephyrian ground troops march through the city. The enemy soldiers were huge and heavily armored, just like their ships. Next to him, a Vex warrior named Sharp Strike clicked nervously. "There are too many of them. We cannot win this fight." Pete looked at the alien through his helmet visor. "That's the second rule of human warfare. You don't have to win every fight. You just have to make the enemy lose." "I do not understand." Pete pointed to a tall building in the center of the city. "See that tower? That's their communication center. They're using it to coordinate all their ground forces. It is too well defended. We cannot reach it." Pete smiled. "We don't need to reach it. We just need to make it useless." He pulled out a small device from his pack. "Katie Phillips taught me some interesting things about Zephyrian technology. Want to see?" He pressed a button. Across the city, every Zephyrian communication device began broadcasting the same signal, but instead of military orders, the speakers played music. Loud, annoying human music that made it impossible for the enemy soldiers to hear their commanders. Sharp Strikes. Compound eyes widened. "How did you do that?" "We hacked their system," Pete explained. "Turns out when you build everything the same way for 1,000 years, it's pretty easy to figure out how to break it." On the Delphinian waterworld, Lieutenant Colonel Nina Walsh stood on a floating platform, watching Zephyrian ships land on the ocean surface. The enemy had expected to find cities on solid ground. Instead, they found a world covered entirely by water, flowing. Current swam up to the platform, their suit bubbling with excitement. "The invaders cannot function in deep water. Their armor is too heavy." Nina nodded. "That's the third rule of human warfare. Make the enemy fight on your terms, not theirs." She activated her communicator. "All units, this is Walsh. Begin Operation Deep 6. Across the ocean, Delphinian submarines began their attack, but they weren't using their own weapons. They were using human-designed mines that attached to enemy ships and waited. When the Zephyrian vessels tried to take off, the mines would explode. Back on Korvac's flagship, chaos reigned. His communication systems played human music. His engines wouldn't start. His ground forces couldn't coordinate their attacks. And now his scouts reported that enemy submarines were surrounding his landing ships. "What are the humans doing to us?" he demanded. General Thrak looked pale. "They're not fighting us, War Prince. They're making us fight ourselves." Korvac didn't understand. "Explain." "Every system failure, every communication breakdown, every tactical problem, it's all caused by our own equipment being turned against us. The humans studied our technology and found ways to make it work for them instead of us." On the bridge of the Defender, Jake watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The Zephyrian fleets were scattered across 3 systems, their ships disabled, their ground forces confused, their commanders unable to communicate. "Admiral Carter wants a status report," Katie said from her station. Jake picked up the communicator. "Admiral, this is Morrison. Phase 1 is complete." "Admiral Lisa," Carter's voice came through clearly from Earth. "What's the enemy status?" Confused, frustrated, and starting to understand that this isn't going to be as easy as they thought. "And our casualties?" "0, Jake replied. "We haven't fired a shot at them." There was a pause. "Captain, explain." Jake looked at his tactical display, where Zephyrian ships drifted helplessly in space. "We're not trying to destroy them, Admiral. We're trying to educate them." "About what?" "About what happens when you pick a fight with someone who's been preparing for this exact situation for the past 20 years. On his disabled flagship, War Prince Korvac stared at his dead screens and began to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. 2 weeks had passed since the first attacks, and War Prince Korvac felt like he was losing his mind. His mighty fleet sat disabled in space. His ground forces wandered in circles, unable to receive orders. His communication systems played human music at random intervals. But worse than the technical problems was what the humans were doing to his empire. "Report from the outer colonies," General Thrak said, his voice shaking. "The Krillon uprising has spread to 6 more worlds. The Bendari slaves have stopped working completely, and the Yithrak sector is in open rebellion." Korvac crushed the metal arm of his command chair. How is this possible? These species have been our slaves for decades. They were broken, defeated. The humans, War Prince. They're broadcasting messages to every world in our empire. They're teaching the slaves how to fight back. On a mining world at the edge of Zephyrian space, a creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a lizard listened to a small radio hidden in the rocks. The voice speaking was human, but the words were translated into his own language. "This is Captain Sarah Williams of the Human Liberation Force," the voice said. "If you're listening to this, you're not alone. Help is coming." The creature's name was Grok, and he had been a slave for 20 years. He had forgotten what freedom felt like. But now, listening to the human woman's voice, he remembered. "Your masters are weak," Sarah continued. "They depend on fear to control you, but fear only works if you're alone. You're not alone anymore." Grok looked around the mine. Other slaves were listening too. Their eyes held something that hadn't been there in years. Hope. "Tonight at midnight, break your chains. Run to the forests. Find the supply depots. Take what you need. Make them afraid for once." Back on his flagship, Korvac received reports from across his empire. Slave revolts were breaking out everywhere. Supply lines were being cut. Military bases were under attack from their own workers. "How are the humans coordinating all of this?" he demanded. Dr. Emily Foster sat in a small room on the human ship Liberator, speaking into a microphone. She was a psychologist who had spent years studying how oppression worked. Now she was using that knowledge to tear apart the Zephyrian Empire from the inside. "The key," she explained to her team, "is that the Zephyrians rule through fear. They make each slave think they're alone, that resistance is impossible. Once we show them they're not alone, the whole system starts to collapse." Lieutenant Commander Danny Rodriguez nodded. "The beauty of it is that we don't have to fight the Empire directly. We just have to remind the slaves that they outnumber their masters by 1,000 to 1. On the Saurian world of Kestel, Ambassador Skell watched in amazement as human advisors worked with his military forces. The transformation was incredible. A week ago, his people had been terrified farmers and merchants. Now they moved like professional soldiers. The fourth rule of human warfare, Captain Morrison explained to a group of Saurian officers, is that every person can be a warrior if they know what they're fighting for. He pointed to a tactical display showing the local area. "Your people know every cave, every forest path, every hiding spot on this planet. The Zephyrians know none of these things. Use that advantage." A young Saurian officer raised her hand. "But Captain, they have better weapons and armor." "So did the British when they fought American colonists," Jake replied. "Better equipment doesn't matter if you can't find your enemy." On the Vex colony world, Major Pete Collins watched with pride as insectoid warriors executed a perfect ambush. The Zephyrian patrol never saw them coming. One moment the enemy soldiers were marching down a street. The next moment they were surrounded by Vex fighters who appeared from sewers, rooftops, and hidden tunnels. "Beautiful work," Pete told Sharpstrike. "Your people are natural guerrilla fighters." "What is guerrilla fighting?" Sharpstrike asked. "It's when you turn the enemy's strength against them. They're big and strong, so they expect big, strong attacks. Instead, you hit them with small, fast strikes and then disappear before they can respond." Sharpstrike's compound eyes gleamed. "Like how we hunt cave worms on our homeworld." "Exactly," Pete said. "You already know how to do this. You just never thought of doing it to an army." On the Delphinian water world, the situation was even better. The Zephyrians had landed expecting to conquer cities. Instead, they found themselves trapped on floating platforms, surrounded by an ocean full of enemies they couldn't see. Lieutenant Colonel Nina Walsh stood on the command platform, watching her sonar display. "Flowing current, your people are incredible. I've never seen underwater tactics like this." Flowing Current's suit bubbled with pride. "We have lived in the deep waters for millions of years. Every current, every reef, every thermal vent is our ally. And now the Zephyrians are learning that," Nina said. "They can't retreat to their ships because we've mined the landing zones. They can't advance because they don't know where the solid ground is. They're stuck. Back in space, War Prince Korvac finally managed to restore communications with one of his ground commanders. General Vex, what is your status? The voice that came back was shaky and frightened. War Prince, we're surrounded. The enemy is everywhere and nowhere. They attack us, then vanish. We cannot find them to fight back. Then burn everything, Korvac ordered. Destroy their cities, their forests, their hiding places. We tried that, War Prince. But when we destroy something, 10 more enemies appear. It's like they're growing stronger from our attacks. Korvac cut the communication in frustration. He turned to General Thrak. How many worlds are still fully under our control? Thrak checked his reports. 12, War Prince, down from 43, at the start of this campaign. In 2 weeks? Yes, War Prince. The humans taught the slaves how to fight, and now they're teaching each other. The rebellion is spreading faster than we can contain it. On Earth, Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the command center, watching status reports flow in from across the galaxy. General Chris Martinez entered the room carrying a tablet full of data. Admiral, the Psychological Warfare Division reports complete success. Zephyrian morale is at an all-time low. Their empire is falling apart. Lisa nodded. And our casualties? Still 0 combat deaths. A few injuries, but nothing serious. The Alliance forces are fighting like professionals now. What about the Zephyrians themselves? Chris checked his tablet. Surprisingly, their casualties are also very low. Most of their soldiers are surrendering, rather than fighting. They're tired, scared, and homesick. Lisa smiled. Good. That's exactly what we wanted. Admiral, may I ask why we're going easy on them? They threaten to enslave Earth. Because, Lisa said, the 5th rule of human warfare is that your enemy today might be your ally tomorrow. We're not trying to destroy the Zephyrians. We're trying to teach them. Teach them what? That conquest through fear doesn't work against people who refuse to be afraid. On his flagship, War Prince Korvac stared at the tactical display showing his crumbling empire. For the first time in his life, he felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Not fear of death in battle. He had faced that many times. This was fear of something worse. Fear that everything he believed about strength and power was wrong. Fear that the small, soft humans were right. 1 month after the conflict began, War Prince Korvac stood alone on the bridge of his flagship. Half his fleet had surrendered. The other half was scattered across the galaxy, trying to hold together an empire that was collapsing faster each day. His officers avoided him. His soldiers whispered about defeat. The communication system crackled to life. Captain Morrison's voice came through clearly. War Prince Korvac, this is Jake Morrison. I think it's time we talked. Korvac stared at the speaker for a long moment. Around him, his bridge crew waited in silence. Finally, he answered. What? Do you want human? To end this, Jake replied, no more fighting, no more dying. Just a conversation between 2 military leaders. You think you have won? I think we've both learned something important. The question is whether you're ready to listen. Korvac looked at his tactical display. Red markers showed rebel activity on dozens of worlds. Yellow markers indicated planets where his forces had lost contact completely. Green markers showing worlds still under firm Zephyrian control were becoming rare. Where do you want to meet? He asked. Harmony Point. Same conference room where this all started. Just you and me? Just you and me, Jake confirmed. 3 days later, the 2 leaders faced each other across the same table where the war had begun. But everything else had changed. Korvac looked older, tired. His armor was scratched and dented. His red eyes had lost their cruel fire. Jake looked the same as before, calm and steady, but now there was something else in his expression. Not victory, but understanding. You came, Korvac said. I gave you my word. Korvac laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your word. A month ago I would have said human words were worthless. And now? Now I know that human words can destroy empires. Korvac leaned back in his chair. Tell me, Captain Morrison, how did you do it? Jake was quiet for a moment. You really want to know? I need to know. My people, my entire species, need to understand what happened here. Jake nodded. You made 3 mistakes, War Prince. The first was thinking that strength comes from size and weapons. And where does it come from? From knowing why you fight. Your soldiers fought because they were ordered to. Our allies fought because they chose to. That makes all the difference. Korvac thought about this. What was my second mistake? You thought fear was a tool of control. But fear only works on people who are alone. Once we showed your slaves that they weren't alone, your empire started falling apart. And the third mistake? Jake's voice became very serious. You threatened Earth. You made it personal. I do not understand. Jake stood up and walked to the viewing port. Outside, ships from dozens of species moved peacefully through space. Former enemies working together. Humans have a saying, War Prince, nobody wins a war. Wars end when one side decides the cost is too high to continue. You are saying I should surrender? I'm saying you should choose. Jake turned back to face him. You can keep fighting and watch your empire tear itself apart. Or you can try something your people have never tried before. Which is? Peace. Korvac stared at him. Peace? After everything that has happened? Especially after everything that has happened. Jake sat back down. War Prince, your people are warriors. I respect that. But there's more than one way to be strong. Explain. Help us rebuild what you destroyed. Use your strength to protect instead of conquer. Teach other species how to defend themselves instead of enslaving them. Korvac was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was different, smaller. You would trust us to do this? I would. Trust you to try. And if you fail, if your people go back to their old ways, then we'll be ready. Ready for what? Jake's voice became hard as steel. To finish what we started. The War Prince looked into Jake's eyes and saw something that chilled him. Not anger, not hatred, but absolute certainty. This human meant every word. You would destroy us completely? We would do what was necessary to protect innocent people, just like we did this time. Korvac understood now. The humans hadn't been trying to destroy the Zephyrian Empire. They had been trying to save it from itself. But if saving it wasn't possible, they would do whatever came next without hesitation. What do you want from me? Korvac asked. I want you to go back to your people and tell them the truth. Tell them that strength without wisdom is just violence. Tell them that fear without respect is just tyranny. Tell them that the galaxy is big enough for everyone if we work together. And if they will not listen? Then you find new leaders who will. Korvac stood up slowly. His massive frame still towered over Jake, but somehow the human seemed larger now. You are asking me to change everything my people believe. I'm asking you to save your people from themselves. The War Prince walked to the viewing port and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, his empire was crumbling. Former slaves were building new lives. Worlds that had known only war were learning about peace. If I do this, he said finally, if I convince my people to change, what guarantee do I have that you will keep your word? The same guarantee you had when you started this war, Jake replied. None. You just have to decide if you trust us more. Then you fear us. Korvac turned around. And if I refuse? If I choose to fight to the end? Jake's answer was simple and final. Then you've chosen death. Just like I told you a month ago. For several minutes neither leader spoke. Outside the viewing port, the stars waited patiently for their decision. Finally, Korvac nodded. I will speak to my people. I will try to make them understand. That's all anyone can do. Korvac walked toward the door, then stopped. Captain Morrison, may I ask you something? Of course. When you said I had chosen death, did you mean death for my people or death for the old ways? Jake smiled for the first time since the meeting began. War Prince, in human experience, those are usually the same thing. As Korvac left the room, he realized that the humans had taught him one final lesson. Sometimes the only way to save something is to let it die and be reborn as something better. The war was over. The real work was just beginning. 6 months later, the first Zephyrian peacekeeping force deployed to protect a small colony from pirates. The galaxy was still learning to trust them, but it was a start, and on Earth, Admiral Carter added a new entry to the human military records. Mission accomplished. Enemy converted to ally. Casualties minimal. Lessons learned. Applicable to future conflicts. The report was filed under a single word: victory.